Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Max here. Hope you're doing fantastic today. It's March the 6th, 2026, live from Stettler. And the speeches are going to start very soon. We have a little delay, not on my end though, but things are starting to bubble up here. We have good pierogies in here, which is awesome. And thanks for tuning in. We have Chris Scott, we have Kathy Flett, we got Ben Trudeau, not related to blackface Trudeau, by the way, Mackie Wagner, and Leighton Grey, who's going to come here as well. So thank you very much for tuning in, and thanks, and the show's going to start soon. As a wise man said, giddy up. Yeah, giddy up, giddy up, giddy up. Also, happy Catcher Day today. Today is Catcher Day. As every day is Catcher Day, so today is no exception. Happy Catcher Day for those who have cats in their home. Some people send me pictures.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our second supper stop on the tour. I'll just go over a couple of announcements to begin with. Our emergency exits are to the side. I feel like a flight attendant here. Are to the side and to the back. I'm an ugly flight attendant, I know. We'll get started with our first speaker very shortly. I'm going to have a couple of people come around with donation bucket. I know that you've given it at the back, but if you feel up to it, you can drop a little bit more in. This tour is being funded entirely by you, the people that we're reaching out to. Our first speaker is a comedian, songwriter, cartoonist. Probably going to miss a few things about him. He is going to give a speech, and then he is also going to, he has written a song dedicated to Alberta independence. So he is going to finish up with that song. So if you would welcome Mr. Ben Crane to the stage.
I appreciate that a whole bunch. How is Stettler tonight? All right. Lot nicer weather than the last time I played here, and that was, I can't remember how many years ago, but it was a big 4-H multi-club fundraiser. And I didn't think anybody would show up because it was blizzardy. I don't know how we even got here. But 4-H being 4-H, they packed the joint. So most of you know me as an entertainer and someone who sings stupid songs and who don't stay serious all that long. And you're right, in most cases I am. But there's some of you who know me a little bit better and are familiar with the little-known fact that I actually do go deep once in a while. I don't always stay there that long, but I love life. My wife, Charmin, and I live on the family home section with a 150-mile view of the blue Canadian Rockies. And Charm actually knew, as in spent time with, her great-grandparents, who were the ones who bought the original quarter off the original homesteaders. So when we say that we're close to the land, that's exactly what it is. There's a lot of century farms in our area and, of course, across the province. And honestly, that's where we get our values from. They're passed down from generation to generation. And that's what I want to talk to you about tonight is values. Our 2 grandkids live on a house across the yard. And 3 nights of the week, or 3 afternoons of the week, they come and spend time with Grandma while their mom, our youngest daughter, is teaching music across the yard. And at the end of the day, 4-year-old and 5-year-old grandson and granddaughter, he takes her hand and he walks her across the parking lot, and he protects her. And he gets up, and they crawl across, they actually use their feet. They walk across the deck and up to the house. He opens the door for her, lets her go in. He's 5 years old. Lets her go in, and he says, ladies first. Values are passed down. And they are passed down because they work. He's also proud of the fact that he's a true farm boy because, well, he fell off his bike and landed on the electric fence. I didn't see that. But he's proud of that fact. But values are incredibly important to me. And it fascinates me how I can take a common redneck and polish him up somewhat by handing him a value. Say respect. He's walking towards a door. So is a lady. He's never met her before. He doffs his hat. He opens the door and lets her in. And there isn't a bit of malice in there. Genuine as the day is long. Those are values. And my job tonight here is not to try to convince you with facts. We've got a whole bunch of other panelists that are far better at that than I am. I just simply want to let you see the heart of why my values no longer relate to the values of this country. And tonight I want to unpack the 3 slogans that have often been the subheading of our movement. Remember what they are? Faith, family, freedom. When you look at these through the eyes of values, all of a sudden it becomes something tangibly appealing, something to be grasped. I'm going to start backwards. Freedom. When you say the word freedom, most folks think of freedom from tyranny, oppression, government overreach, dictatorship, all that ugly stuff that controlling folks love to dish out. And this is something that really needs no explanation. It's just simple common sense. But what if we tweak that phrase to read freedom to? Freedom to thrive, not just survive. Freedom to be what you're built to be. What are you good at? Freedom to run your business the way you know it needs to be. Free from interference, micromanagement by people nowhere near you, never heard of you, no vested interest in you, and don't give a flying rip about you. Freedom to associate, to speak, to hold your own opinions. And I love this one, freedom to fail and to learn from your mistakes. I remember a Peanuts cartoon that I saw. I absolutely love it. Lucy and Peanuts are reclined under the tree, philosophizing as they often did. And Lucy's bemoaning the fact that some kid fell off their bike and knocked their noggin. And so now all of a sudden everybody has to wear a helmet to protect that kid and every kid from something that might possibly injure them. And Peanut's reaction is brilliant. He says, "Stupid should hurt." There's a t-shirt. But you know what? I was thinking this through, and I thought that a truly free society will boast the most successful, highly motivated people and the most vibrant economy, with citizens who breathe life into their communities, not suck it out. and we're experiencing an alarming loss of freedoms. Is there any hope? What if we could change all of that and take back the freedoms that have been stolen? Family. I'm going real fast here because I only got 10 minutes and I've got 17 hours worth of... No, I don't. The strength of community is the family. Have you noticed that? And the family strength relies on and is a direct result of solid values. Family is parents passing down values to your kids. Family is staying connected to your grandparents, having conversations with them to learn from their experiences and wisdom. Take 4-H. It's been with us since 1913. It moved into Canada. And that was a year after Calgary Stampede started. So Guy Wiedek would have known what 4-H was about. And right in its pledge, said before each meeting, even today, it promises to build the members' life and character for the betterment of their community and their club and their country. That's values. Family teaches all manner of values. Take the value of other-orientedness. Just think about a family of 4 girls, Sunday morning, 1 bathroom. Been there. You got to think of each other. The value of working together, cooperating, and accomplishing goals with teamwork. The value of getting along with other people with differing opinions than yourself. We know that's not really an issue today, is it? Hearing them and understanding them, not resorting to calling them names when you lose the argument. Hey, you can always change your friends, but you're stuck with family. Family teaches you so much. I mentioned the importance of staying connected to previous generations. And that's because I believe it's important to look back, because we've already been through this before. From outright disdain towards us from our federal leaders, to hostile policies designed specifically for our failure and to keep us in our proper place. National Energy Program, energy caps, all that fun stuff. And we've tried altering things before. Reform movement, conservative prime ministers, but there is no solution, in my opinion. The system is simply wired against our favor right from the top. This is our last hope. And then faith. This is a fun one. I hear folks saying that running a country based on Christian values is shoving religion down people's throats. I understand that, but I suggest the contrary. That the concept of forcing an ideology or an opinion is actually diametrically opposed to God himself. He operates on the basis of free will. In fact, you don't even have to be a Jesus follower to appreciate truth, honesty, respect, fairness, a strong stand against stealing and deception, and living in peace with your neighbor, or even your neighbor helping you out in a crisis. These are all Judeo-Christian values that our society has been based on for eons. But to the Christian, though, I'll say this. And by the way, if you're not in this category, don't sweat it. Feel free to tune me out for a second. But I will let you in on a big spoiler alert, because you still get in on the incredibly huge benefits that I'm talking about. It's a win-win no matter what way you're swinging. So back to the Christian. Do you fully understand the impact of your personal faith on your country? There's a very famous verse. God says, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from everything that they're doing that's against God." This is the Christians. He says, you do 3 things, I'll do 3 things. I promise I will hear. I promise I will forgive. And I love this one. He says, I will heal your land. Can you imagine what the new country of Alberta could look like with a direction like this? And the cool thing is that all of this would positively benefit even the most devout atheist. It's a win-win, folks. How you handle your faith will impact your country. So to wrap it up, faith, family, freedom. These are values that have been time-tested and proven for eons. Entire countries have been formed on this. Now, I've heard the nostalgic concern bemoaning the breakup of this country, and I get it. No divorce is pretty. But folks, this country's already broke, and in many ways, Alberta started out with this country completely broke. We are on the outside on purpose with intent. And I've come to think and to realize that doing nothing has become the greater risk than just sticking our head in the sand. So it can be argued, I think, that we're not the ones that are leaving. By and large, I think we've maintained a steady course forward. That's just the way we are in this province. Just hanging on to these old traditional values that are so good, while the rest of the country has veered off into foreign waters. No pun intended, maybe. The Canada we remember, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and remember in a Mayberry sort of way, is actually closest resembled to by Alberta. We have one chance, folks. It's a rare gift, a precious gift handed to us to reestablish these same time-honored values into a new constitution and into a new country. Abe Lincoln, he'd been around a while. He said that the only way to accurately predict your future is to write it. It's our only chance, folks. Let's grab a pen and start writing. I appreciate that. Just a minute here. I want to thank all the guys that are putting this on. And I want to thank Max down there. He is an amazing feller. That's right. Give it up for Mr. Max. We're going? You betcha. So what I did was wrote this song, and at first I couldn't play it because I went and busted up my finger. I tried cutting it, and so I can actually play today for the first time in probably a week and a half. So, but I do have the tracks. I recorded this at home, and I played the instruments. And this song, Shane says, you can always go home and write a song for us. I thought, yeah, right, that's easy to say. But I went home and I couldn't get that thought out of my head. So I writ one called My Alberta Roots Run Deep. The only life I know goes back 100 years, steeped in deep tradition, sweat and blood and tears. The value of hard work, common sense and hope and truth, the family and freedom, and the value of our youth. What makes me want to hold on to what I know is right, and in the face of opposition, stand the ground and fight. My Alberta, deep in my blood, in my biggest hunger every day. When somebody tries to move him, take it all away. I just stand my ground in the sand, stand my ground and say, living on the land, watching life come and go, working hard and playing hard, sunshine and in snow. We don't really ask for much, but we know that God provides, and He's given us all the tools we need to enjoy this life and thrive. So what makes us want to hold on to what we know is right? Take our position, stand our ground and fight on over. In our blood, in our bones, it gets stronger every day. When somebody tries to move it, strip it all away. Get out of line there in the sand, stand around and say, Alberta, they don't mind, they find. Made us who we are today, and when life's this good, it don't blow it away. Wherever you can't take them out or pull them up. They go deeper every day. Somebody tries to move it, tear it all away. Draw a line there in the ground, stand your ground and say, my Alberta rules run deep, run deep. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for listening and not throwing anything, especially you guys in the front row. We do appreciate that more than we know how to say. All right, we got a next guy coming up, and I didn't realize that we went back as far as we did. Actually, not him, but his wife and I. But he's a great guy. I bought his book and I've read it, and I actually followed it, and it was fantastic. Mr. Michael is here from up north a little ways. He is a political scientist. We're talking about these guys who know better than I do. This is the guy. This is the start of them. And he's a regular columnist with Western Standard. Come on up, Mr. Michael Wagner. Would you welcome him, please?
Thank you, Ben. That was very nice. I just have to adjust my eyes here a bit. The podium's not exactly quite the best length for me to see this, but it's just my old age, I guess. But actually, my talk here actually keys off the end of Ben's talk pretty well. It's called Alberta Independence is the way to preserve what was best about Canada. You know, Canada was a very great country, a country that we could have been proud of. We were proud of for many, many years. For the first 100 years or so, we were known for exceptional national projects, like we put a railway across the northern part of the continent. We took a wilderness area and built a community out of it, a community that grows so much food that feeds the world. We did magnificent things in this country, and we could be proud of this country. And our military especially, did major things in both world wars and other things that the world knew about what the strength and the abilities of our military. We had lots to be proud of. But since the 1960s, this country has changed. Liberal leaders decided to change this country into a different kind of country, one that prioritized leftist social engineering over our historic identity. So basically just having a bit of a trouble here seeing this for a sec, sorry about that. But anyway, The transformation of our country by the Liberals from the way we were into a different kind of country that began in the 1960s was criticized by many Canadians. And one of the best critics of this was Ted Byfield, the founder of Alberta Report magazine. Now, Ted Byfield had been born and raised in Toronto, and then he moved out to Alberta and became a fiery Alberta patriot, a very strong defender of our province. Now, having grown up in Toronto, he talked about what Canada was like back in the 1930s and 40s when he grew up. Back then, our flag was, the Union Jack, or the red ensign with the Union Jack in the upper corner. And the Union Jack actually consists of 3 crosses. The Cross of St. George from England, the Cross of St. Andrew from Scotland, and the Cross of St. Patrick from Ireland. So the Union Jack, our original flag, was an explicitly Christian symbol of our country. Canada had that kind of Christian heritage to it. But of course, in 1965, our flag was changed by Prime Minister Lester Pearson. So we got rid of the red ensign and replaced it with the maple leaf flag. And of course, the maple leaf, the sugar maple tree of that maple leaf, does not grow on the prairies, does not grow in Western Canada. So we ended up getting a flag to represent the country that doesn't actually grow in the West, that doesn't actually represent the West. And so this was symbolic of the kind of change that was happening in our country. We were losing our national heritage. We were losing our national identity. And when a country begins to lose its identity, people still need to identify with something. And so people in Canada would start to identify more with their region, their province. There was this natural tendency, there was criticisms of people in Canada identifying too close with their region or province over the national identity, but this was a natural result of our federal government attacking our national identity. Now, this is important because sometimes Albertans who support our independence are accused of being disloyal to Canada, but this isn't true. Because Albertans who support independence are often those who remember and deeply love the Canada that existed before the Liberals wrecked it. We are proud of our country, of our past of our country. There's actually kind of 2 Canadas now. There's old Canada and new Canada. And Ted Byfield talked about this in his columns. He talked about how old Canada was basically founded by Sir John A. Macdonald and given a constitution in 1867. And new Canada was basically founded by Pierre Trudeau, who gave us a new constitution in 1982. There's old Canada and new Canada. And Ted Byfield went on to give a description of the differences between these 2 countries. This is what he wrote. Old Canada had some harsh laws but was safe to live in. New Canada has enlightened, lenient laws and is increasingly unsafe to live in. Old Canada was generally committed to the free enterprise system, modified where necessary. New Canada is increasingly committed to the socialist system, magnified where unnecessary. Old Canada met its military obligations, in fact served magnificently in 2 world wars. New Canada has virtually no army and has reneged on its military obligations. Old Canada was frugal and poor but paid its way. New Canada runs at a $14 billion deficit. Now, the $14 billion figure is from 1980, so by today's standards, it'd be a much bigger figure. But these are essentially 2 very different countries. And so the question we have to ask is not whether are you loyal to Canada, but to which Canada are you loyal to? And this is what Byfield said in his next quote. When people put the question, are you loyal to Canada, I have to ask, to which Canada? The one we used to know, or the one which Mr. Trudeau is forcing upon us? I certainly felt part of the first, but that country doesn't seem to be there anymore. About the second, I have grave doubts. So it's not a question of being disloyal to Canada. It's a question of determining which Canada you're loyal to. Our national identity was under attack by Pierre Trudeau, and so to be loyal to Trudeau's Canada was to be disloyal to the original Canada. Pierre Trudeau transformed Canada into a different kind of country, one that is no longer recognizable to many of us. So how did Trudeau transform our country? We didn't like the country that we had, and so he decided to reshape it into something else. But how did he do this? Well, if you want to change a country, you change its constitution. The Constitution is the foundational document of a country. So when you change the Constitution, you're changing the country, and Pierre Trudeau changed our Constitution. He didn't like Canada the way it was, and he wanted to make it into a different country. So when he was Justice Minister in 1968, he first came with his proposal for a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So as Justice Minister, his proposal for a Charter of Rights and Freedoms was actually published by the federal government in the book form. So Trudeau argued that without a constitutional document enumerating or explicitly enumerating our rights, we didn't actually have rights. He argued that we don't have explicitly enumerated rights in our Constitution, and that was true in a sense. Like in the British system that Canada follows, we have rights, but they're not explicitly enumerated in a document like the United States. The United States has a Bill of Rights with explicitly enumerated rights. We didn't have that. So Trudeau was telling Canadians, if you don't have it written explicitly enumerated in a constitution like the United States does, then you don't have rights. But he was actually misleading us because we did have rights. And if you look at Canada in 1968 or earlier, even since, like we had individual rights protected in Canada better than any other country in the world. Like there might be some who are as good as Canada in protecting rights, but there weren't any better in protecting rights than Canada was. And so to say that we needed them guaranteed and written into a constitution was kind of misleading, but nevertheless it was an easy sell for Trudeau because he would go to people and say, don't you want your rights written into the constitution? And who would say, no, I don't want my rights written into the constitution. So it was an easy sell to him because it seems like we need to have those rights written into the constitution. So the Charter of Rights was actually kind of popular when he brought it in, and so that's why it was adopted. But he had fundamentally changed the country. Now, so that was in 1982 when they got the Charter of Rights, but there was a 3-year period before parts of that charter were brought into effect because they knew that the charter was going to affect many laws in Canada. So the provincial and federal governments were given 3 years to bring their laws into conformity to the charter before it came fully into effect in 1985. So in 1985, it came fully into effect, and our justice minister at that time was John Crosbie, like we had the Brian Mulroney government, and John Crosbie, as the justice minister, was overseeing this process with the Charter of Rights coming into effect. And this is what John Crosbie said in 1985 as the charter is about to come fully into effect. He said, "The public does not realize that we already have had a revolution in Canadian society. The adoption of a charter was a revolution. It has changed the whole power structure of Canadian society. It has taken tremendous power from governments and given it to the courts, the Supreme Court of Canada, which is not widely realized. Therefore, we are in a whole new legal environment. There has been a revolutionary change." The adoption of the charter was a revolutionary change. That's what the Justice Minister said in 1985. Nobody told us that when they were advocating to us that we should get the charter. We found out about it after we adopted it. So the charter brought to our country a fundamental change. It fundamentally changed our country. Now, Dr. William Gardner in 1994, he wrote that the charter had, quote, was an entire state enterprise for the reshaping of Canada. He went on to say that Pierre Trudeau viewed the charter, quote, as a means to the achievement of some ideal state, an instrument for forcing society into a predetermined social and political mold. So that isn't exactly what Pierre Trudeau achieved. With his so-called Charter of Rights, he essentially refounded Canada as a different country, one that fit his ideological program. Each and every day, courts across Canada enforce Trudeau's vision of Canada using his Charter of Rights. In this sense, Pierre Trudeau rules Canada from the grave. He is dead but not gone. His ideology continues to shape our country and will continue to do so thanks to the Charter. And I have a really good example of this from January 29th, 2006. This is a column from the National Post online. It's by Ted Morton. Now, Ted Morton was, for several decades, a political scientist at the University of Calgary, then he was a cabinet minister for a while. This column is called, "The Charter is Gutting the Provinces, and the Data Proves It." So it's based on a study from the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. So what happens over the years, provinces adopt various laws, and some groups will challenge those laws in the court, and they'll go to the Supreme Court, and on the basis of the Charter, the Supreme Court often strikes down provincial laws. So what's happening is that the Supreme Court is reducing provincial powers using the Charter. Year after year, the provinces are losing powers on the basis of the Charter. So Pierre Trudeau has been dead for 25 years or so, and yet his ideological vision of Canada continues to be imposed by the Supreme Court on the basis of the Charter. So his ideology is continuing to impact our country year after year, and that's just in the area of provincial powers. Now, besides changing our Constitution, Trudeau and his son were very active in changing Canada's fundamental identity. By the time Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister in 2015, in that year he was interviewed by the New York Times, and Justin Trudeau told the New York Times that Canada has no core identity. Like the Trudeaus have been so active, the Liberal Party of Canada, so active in eliminating our original historical identity that Trudeau could tell the New York Times that we had no core identity. And he went on to say that Canada is the first post-national state. And in saying these things, the New York Times pointed out that Justin Trudeau was the avatar of his father's vision, that Justin Trudeau was fulfilling his father's vision in declaring Canada a country without an identity. So instead of our historical identity, what do the Liberals want? They want Canadian identity to be abstract universal concepts, based on abstract universal concepts. What are those? Diversity, inclusivity, tolerance. So instead of our historical identity with our military achievements and the things we accomplished as a country, they want these universal abstract concepts to represent our country. That's the new Canada as opposed to the old Canada. But many people still remember the old Canada and what it meant to us. We want our country back. That is why we support Alberta independence. Good old Canada has vanished. In its place, we have new Trudeau Canada, which reeks of wokeism, socialism, and an increasing police state. But an independent Alberta can and will uphold the noble traditions and freedoms of the original Canadian dream. Thank you. Maybe I'm supposed to introduce the next speaker, and I'm not sure who that would be. Oh, okay. So here's Kathy Flett. I met Kathy Flett through the Wexit movement a number of years ago, and she's become a major figure in the independence movement, traveling and speaking and doing other things. And so I'm very privileged to introduce to you tonight Kathy Flett.
We desire, every patriotic Canadian desires that the great trade of the prairie shall go to enrich our own people in the East, to build up its workshops and factories and contribute in every way to its prosperity. Those words were said in 1904, the year before we became a province, by Sir Clifford Sifton, who was the Minister of the Interior at the time. And that's what this province was built for. Now, we're several years away from that today, but what's changed? Probably not a lot. We're still doing that today. We were one of two provinces that were colonized into Confederation. Regardless what people try to tell you, we did not negotiate our way in. We were told, this is how it's going to be, and we were appointed our first premier. You'll be shocked to find out it was a Liberal. But all of these years later, you would think that maybe we were able to make some shifts in the system so that we're not contributing in every way to the East's prosperity. And some people believe that changes have been made. My goal tonight is to show you that they haven't, so that you've got some talking points to take back to your friends, your family, your colleagues, your neighbors, the people that you talk to every day who are still a little bit confused as to why we're so adamant that we need to become our own nation sooner rather than later. When we look at the last federal election, we're told that it's representation by population in the House of Commons, right? That's what we're told. It's representation. Too bad you guys don't have enough people over there in Alberta to get more seats. Well, if that's actually the case, how come they called the election, the winner, at 8:06 and our polls close at 8 o'clock? Our ballot boxes weren't even opened yet to be counted, and the East had already decided who won. Our votes were not required, even if you voted for the winner, and please don't admit it in this room, but if you did, your vote wasn't needed to do it. Some people say, well, if the Conservatives had just gotten in, then it would be okay. We wouldn't be in this same situation. Well, for any bill to pass, it has to first go through the MPs voting on it, and the senators all have to vote on it. This is something else that a lot of people don't know. Of all of those senators, but a handful have not been appointed by Prime Minister Trudeau. So knowing that, if Pierre Poilievre had won, or if he does ever win, does it matter for us? It doesn't. We're told that Canada is broken, but I would tell you it is not. It's working exactly like it's supposed to. It favors the East over the West. And it doesn't matter what we do over here. We tried with reform. Remember that? We tried. The West wants in. So we put the reform in. They even became the official opposition. But it didn't matter. And then Stephen Harper got in. The West was in. And we celebrated. We celebrated hard. We were excited. And it got so insane in Ottawa, he had to prorogue Parliament 3 times. Not only that, he found out right away that if he didn't cater to the East, he'd never get back in. And one of the ways that he catered to the East that most people don't know is that equalization formula that most of us didn't even know existed 7 years ago, he changed it to include 50% of our resource revenues while excluding Quebec's. That's why we always pay in, even when we're in a deficit, but eastern provinces still receive. And what that amounts to, in dollars, to bring it right down to home, is around $5,000 per Albertan, not taxpayer, per Albertan that we send for them to tell us, no, you can't have a pipeline. No, you can't have this. No, you can't have that. For them to tell us, we don't want to buy your oil, we're going to get it from overseas. Or last week, big old tanker full of natural gas showed up from Australia to go to the east, but not us. But we're supposed to be our own best customer, we were told. We're in it together. Except we're not. See, we're not the ones pushing us out of Confederation. They're pushing us out of Confederation. We're just saying, okay, fine, we'll go. We're done trying to get you to understand that this doesn't work for us. And that's okay. We don't have to apologize for it. I don't think we should. Because here's the thing. Once we are our own country, let's just dream a little bit. Now, we know it's going to be a challenge getting there. Ottawa is not going to make it easy. That's fine. Whatever. We're up to the challenge. But let's think about what we could have once we're on the other side. We could have a healthcare system that actually works because we wouldn't be under the Canada Health Act. We could get access to medication that we can't right now because Ottawa says we can't have it. We could get all sorts of different types of procedures done here to such a degree that we could be a go-to destination instead of us having to go out of country to get things done. That could happen, but only if we're brave enough to take that step. The other thing that could happen is we would no longer see these headlines that tell us that judges are taking into consideration a really, really, really bad man's refugee status before handing out a sentence after he hurt our children. That's happening with alarming frequency. That won't happen here because we'll have our own criminal code and our own way of dealing with these monsters. That probably won't include you are under arrest. Just saying. Right? What else could we do? We'd have our own trading partners. We wouldn't have to rely on Ottawa for that. We wouldn't be the laughing stock of the world anymore. Instead, we would be on the global stage as one of the richest countries on the planet, commanding the respect that we deserve. We can't get that right now. We can't get that right now. You know what else we would have? Here's a question for you. I love asking this question. How many of you remember the day when you would leave your keys in the ignition of your unlocked car outside of your unlocked house so you didn't lose the keys to your car because you already didn't know where the keys to your house were? Right? We can get that back again because we will have our own police service and we will be able to defend our property. You know what else we can have? We can have schools that actually teach what's important to our children rather than trying to turn them into little social justice warriors. Something else that I love to think about? Pension plans. There's a lot of talk about pension plans. How many of you, if you pass away before you've collected all that was there to owe to you, how many of you know what happens to that money? Where does it go? It's gone. Why can't that go in your estate? We could do that. What about employment insurance? Let's call it unemployment insurance, because that's what it is. You don't need insurance when you have a job, you need it when you don't. If we want to keep that, how many of you paid into that all your lives and barely received a penny back? We could roll that into your pension too. There are so many things that we can do if we just open up our minds enough to go, yeah, you know what? This is worth going the distance to get this done. This is worth taking a leap on things that we maybe don't know what's on the other side, but it's going to be way too exciting to sit here and continue to question. So as we get through these next few weeks, I would really encourage you that when you're talking to other people, just dream with them. Rather than trying to convince, go with the what if. What if we did this? What could we have? What were we supposed to be that we could be now? Because we're out from the thumb of Ottawa. And then this time next year, we'll be able to get together again for a really amazing dinner and begin to celebrate what it is that we're on our way to accomplishing. Thank you so much, everybody. It is my honor, thank you. It is my honor to introduce our next speaker to you. Alberta is a very interesting place. You never know when you're going to run back into somebody that you met 10-ish years ago. So you always want to mind your P's and Q's because your past may come back to get you. But Ben Trudeau, I met when I was actually volunteering at our local women's shelter in Sherwood Park. I was on a mission to build a new shelter, and somehow or another, I can't even remember how, I was introduced to Ben Trudeau. And when somebody first told me his name, I was like, no. No, we're not having this conversation. But they said, no, Kathy, it's okay. I'm like, all right. But somebody's going to pay for this if it goes sideways. Anyways, we became very good friends. We had a lot of great conversations, and it's my honor to be circled back into getting to know him again and to introduce him to you. So please welcome Ben Trudeau.
Yes. So, am I related? Yes, 13 generations past. My ancestor came here on my mother's side in 1642, on my father's side, which is a Trudeau, in 1651. And the first Trudeau, his name was Trudeau with a T, and at the time he was under a contract of the King of France. And at the time there was nuns training young ladies sent by the king as well to get married in the new Montreal that was under construction. And Trudeau was a contractor and married one of these girls, and he didn't want his family in France to know that he basically married a whore. So he changed his name for Trudeau with a D, had 6 boys and 5 girls, and Justin and Dad are from the oldest of these 6 boys. I'm from the second one, so this is where we meet. Moved to Alberta in 2008. I came here as a land developer in the Edmonton region, and it's politics that brought me here. I come from a very politicized family, not because of our name, just because of my dad's job, who's a PR guy in Quebec, speechwriter, and a guy specialized in for politicians. So I was raised in that environment. In '94, I was part of the group that founded the ADQ, Action démocratique du Québec, a political party, who hold the balance of power for the 95 referendum. So in 1995, 94, when Parizeau became premier, when he was polling, he was missing 7% to win the referendum. And it happens to be that our young formation of only 6 months old gathers 7% of the vote. So I said, well, I need them to win my referendum. So he called us in, and I was 22, our leader was 24. We were about 10 very active in the party. And we sat at a negotiation table for the referendum question that we had modified. Parizeau was he didn't like the modification we asked. But what we asked as modification, because we were not separatist, was we want the referendum question not to be on separation. We want the referendum question to be on reforming the country. And you will ask people if they give you 1 year to deal with the feds, and if these negotiations fell through, then we separate. That was the question in 95 of the referendum. Over 94% participation on that referendum. We lost by 54,000 votes to the no, considering that there was 82,000 ballots rejected. So it was a very, very, very tight race. Following that, I kept on working a lot in politics. That led me in 2000 under the Harper government. I was hired as in charge of Canada Economic Development. That was an agency spreading money to Quebec, $4.3 billion a year, $1.5 billion to private businesses, and the rest in infrastructure. And it's in that context that I end up in Alberta under a mission to build a bridge between Alberta and Quebec. So I flew in to meet the Premier, Mr. Stelmach at the time. And that same morning I had a breakfast with him. I had to resign, politics being what it is. So I ended up moving in this province following that. I went, and then I met my wife in 2011. She's sitting there, Jen, who was born and raised in Edmonton. We have 4 kids, all born in Alberta. And I'm an Albertan, despite my accent and despite my quite long history in Quebec politics. And I came back very active in politics after the flip-flop of Jason Kenney on the vaccine, where I said, okay, I need to do something. And I joined TBA at the time and met a lot of very good people in that process. Met Premier Smith before she even filed her leadership form. And after that, once she became Premier, I started a lobby company with a friend of mine, George Bears, who started TBOF, Taking Back Our Freedom, during the trucker convoy. And I've been quite involved since. And in that process, in the process of separation, everything that raised up, I figured out that there was a lot of information missing to make a decision. And this is why I wrote that book, which I'll call Enough, that I published 3 weeks ago. And in that book, the first portion of the book, I speaks about the history of Canada, but the history of Canada starting in 1534, not 1769. And I speak in that book of the history of the Constitution from Quebec view. Then I explain how Quebec became master in manipulating the Westminster system and in taking the Constitution that we have and becoming sovereign under it. And then what I state in there is that we can do the same. So Quebec collects its own taxes. Quebec even have introduced private health care a couple of years ago. In fact, there's a doctor in Red Deer that rent surgery rooms in Quebec to perform knee surgeries. So Quebec does it. And I realized how few people knew how much power that Constitution enabled us to take. So I said in the movement, I believe that we need to explore that as well. There's not only we leave, we stay. Is that we leave, we stay, or we have the courage to assert our constitutional right. We have the courage to collect our own tax, to make our pension plan, to kick the RCMP out. We have the courage to create our own firearm registry, to introduce our own private health care, all under the Canadian Constitution. No referendum needed, only the vote at the ledge with a majority government. So what we need is a courageous government in place. So what am I doing here in a separatist or I don't know, discussion, let's say? I believe that it's important that that discussion in a separation discussion. And it's important to sign that petition because we need to have that discussion. Without that question, there's no discussion, and we need to have that discussion. So it's primordial, it's important, it's absolutely necessary to sign that petition and to have that question asked. Because this is what enables us to change stuff, and this is what will enable us to give the courage to our politicians who don't have that culture of Quebec to be able to take, even though we win or not, even though the vote is yea or nay, we can change our situation under this constitution. And I will go a step further. I believe that we should take Quebec as ally in just trashing the system. So the last move that I really like that Quebec did, the same day that we adopt at our legislature the bill number 1 under the first week of Premier Smith, or the first month of being a sovereign Alberta within United Canada, which is only window dressing because it doesn't mean anything. That same day, Quebec voted at their legislature that the MLAs wouldn't have to pay allegiance to the king anymore. Last spring, when King Charles was giving a throne speech, Quebec timed their session in Quebec to have a vote while the king was giving a speech to kick the crown out of any intervention in Quebec. And not only that, but by the time the king finished his speech, there was a courier waiting for him, giving him in hand the vote of the Quebec legislature. And then the next day, they put a for sale sign in front of the Lieutenant Governor's house, saying that for now on, the Lieutenant Governor and that royal assent that's on the law, we don't consider it anymore. Once it's voted in our legislature, we don't care about the royal assent. She's going to become somebody that just file in Ottawa whatever we decide here. And you know what? All that is non-constitutional. You know what was the consequence? Nothing. So we need to have the courage to do at least what the Constitution enables us, and then that will give us the boldness to go beyond it and to make that country, with a partner like Quebec and with other provinces that want to follow through, a country that will, Ottawa cannot fight two front 4,000 kilometers away at the same time. They don't have the capacity for that. No, there's so many troubled child you can have in the family. So I believe that if we have the courage to sign that petition, to start the process, to start the discussion, to start taking our right, to keep our money here, it's a travesty that every Friday afternoon, the royalty of our oil and gas is deposited at the CIBC account. $500 million a week. We put that on the CIBC account in Toronto, where we have our own banks, we have our credit unions, and so it's time that we be sovereign and take control of our own stuff. So that's what my book is about. And on that, I will introduce a man that we've worked a bit together. He's a man of God, husband, father, podcaster, lawyer, fierce lawyer. You better not have him against you. And he's a great guy with conviction that puts conviction first. And is not afraid of speaking boldly to whoever needs to hear him. Leighton Grey.
Thanks, Ben. Hello, everyone. Hello, Stettler. Ben, I don't know if you realize it, but you've just made Alberta history. You are the first person named Trudeau who ever received a round of applause in Alberta. So bravo. Okay, start with a pop quiz. What are the three main branches of the federal government in Canada today? BlackRock, CBC, and pedophiles. That's not what I'm up here to talk about, though. I'm up here to talk about the relationship between Canada and Alberta and our Indigenous peoples. Some of you might have seen or heard a speech that I gave a couple of months ago in Red Deer, where I talked about the deeply dysfunctional relationship. Really, it's a form of apartheid. And it's very bad for Indigenous peoples, and I am one. I can show you the card, actually. I'm Indian number 37802704041. So that's proof. There's a statute. It's the oldest statute in Canada, the Indian Act. It goes all the way back to 1876. And I know people who are Indigenous or Aboriginal or First Nation or whatever color or stripe they want to call themselves, legally they're Indians. And that's a strange term because we think of Indians as, the people who come from India, the sort of the lower Asian continent. But in Canada, an Indian is a native person, somebody who's part of either a First Nations band community or Métis or Inuit. And whatever color or name that they have, the reality is that in Canada, we have a segregated society. And the question is, why do we have that? Well, I gave an example when I was in Red Deer. I used what's called a metaphor. A metaphor is a symbolic story, right? For example, Shakespeare would said, what is Capulet, what is Montague? It is neither hand nor foot, nor any part of thee. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Okay? All of you Shakespeare fans. So here's a metaphor. Think of a big, hairy, ugly, voracious spider, like a tarantula. Okay? So it spins this web, and what does the spider do? What does the spider want to do? What's the purpose the spider has instinctively in spinning the web? Well, it's to capture prey. Well, in Canada, the Canadian state, views not only Indians, but all of the sort of privileged minorities, everyone on the victimhood scale, whether it's LGBTQ or black people or Albertans, as essentially food. And Kathy was talking about this during her speech, about how they see us. But for the government of Canada, the Indian is a useful idiot. So that when you see the chief of the Sturgeon Lake Band, who's part of a demographic that represents a small fraction of 1% of all the people in Alberta, suing the government of Alberta in order to stop a referendum, you're seeing the federal government at work. You're seeing what it's doing. It's a game of distraction, okay? I'll put it this way. Imagine that the 1% of all the richest people in Canada, white people, just to pick on everybody who's here, if they sued the government of Alberta to stop the referendum, what would your reaction be? Oh, those elitist bigots, look at them. They're trying to block the referendum. All those rich people driving BMWs and Mercedes. So that would be simple, and that would take all the pressure off of the federal government, you see. So what they do is they get the Indian, and they actually fund it through NGOs. They get the useful idiots, the Indians, the chiefs, to go and be the fodder, to be the fly in the web, okay? And we focus all of our attention and all our vilification on the Indian, when really the enemy is Ottawa. And I'm going to illustrate this by just looking at what's next door, what's happening over to our friends in British Columbia. Do you guys know about this? Okay. So what you have there is a trial run, an experiment for what the federal government wants to do with the rest of Canada. And if we don't achieve independence, it's coming here. So what's happened is, through a series of court rulings, and my friend Michael Wagner in his books, he talks about how this happens. By the way, I bought Ben's book. I'm looking forward to reading it. Michael Wagner has written the best book written so far on the chart. It's called Leaving God Behind. It's over there on the table. So buy that book and read it, because you'll get a whole new understanding of what I'm talking about. Anyway, here's the idea. Indians in Canada cannot own land. Did you know that? How many knew that? Good. Who owns the land that the Indians occupy? That's right, the Crown and right of Canada. So when you see on the news that the Cowichan Band is getting Indian title, what are you hearing? A lie. That is a lie, okay? Courts create a legal fiction, which is another form of lying. There's no such thing as Indian title. They don't own land the way you and I do, if you're fortunate to own land in Alberta, and I hope you do. So when the Cowichan Band gets the land that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars belonging to people in Richmond, out on Vancouver Island, who owns that land? Your federal government. Okay? Now let's talk about Musqueam. You've heard about Musqueam? Okay? Musqueam. An agreement that the federal government has entered into with an Indian band that actually doesn't really exist, because there are no treaties in British Columbia. So all of the Indian bands in BC are fake. They are legal fictions. They do not exist. But the federal government has created the fiction, okay, the appearance of an Indian band to whom they are going to transfer the city of Vancouver, the third largest city in Canada, is going to be transferred to an imaginary Indian band. This only in Canada, folks. Used to be Red Rose. Remember? Only in Canada, eh? No, this is happening. This is happening. So who's going to own Vancouver? The federal government. Okay? Now, here's the problem. Under our current constitution, which is actually a pretty good constitution as constitutions go, under section 9213, the province owns all property and civil rights. That includes land. That includes Vancouver. That includes the land that the Cowichan want. They don't own it because it's not Indian land. There's no treaty. How is the federal government getting this land? How are they doing it? Through the cooperation of the provincial government, Mr. Eby. You see? Who knows how many countries in Canada have adopted UNDRIP? Does anybody know what UNDRIP is? Okay. United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which says that any land that Indians in Canada think is theirs, it's theirs. It's like, remember on Sesame Street? Mine, 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 mine. That's it. Okay? Only one country in the world has been so insane as to adopt UNDRIP. Canada has that distinction. Only one legal jurisdiction anywhere in the world has been even more insane as to bring UNDRIP into provincial law, and that's British Columbia. And that's why British Columbia is disappearing. And folks, I'm sorry to tell you this, the same thing is going to happen in Alberta if we're not careful. Maybe you don't believe me. And some of you, I talk with some of you, you think, oh, well, you know, this Alberta government, they're on our side. Danielle's got our back. She's going to support that referendum. By the way, she's already tried to torpedo it by muddying the waters with a whole bunch of other questions. But I'm going to give you a little bit of end off on this, a little bit of constitutional history. And my friend Michael Wagner probably knows this, but in 1881, the House of Lords decided a case of Citizens Insurance versus Parsons. It's a very important case in Canadian history. So what was happening back then? Well, it seems, surprise, surprise, that way back in the late 19th century, the federal government was trying to expand their own powers. Just imagine. Just imagine. And this has been happening since the beginning of Canada. Even before Canada was a country, this was happening. But ever since the BNA Act, which is our constitution before we got the our current constitution, the federal government and the provinces were going to court fighting over jurisdiction. And it's always the federal government that's been encroaching, okay? So in this case, what happens is they held that federal jurisdiction should not be construed as applying to all regulations of trade and commerce which do not affect civil rights. Listen to this. But the local legislatures or provinces are empowered to deal with all questions of a local character, and the mode in which persons carry on their business within the limits of the province is a question of local character. If a railway began and ended within a particular province, there is no reason why provincial legislation should not regulate it. Drink that in for a second. We could have our own railways. The provinces are virtually separate countries federated into one, as in the case of the United States, and each member of the Confederation is a separate state and has the right to make its own laws, subject to those which apply to the whole Confederation. The term civil rights, by the way, this is still the wording of our Constitution, cannot be restricted as contended for on the other side by the federal government. So what's my point here? Some of you are thinking, well, you know, we don't really need a referendum. We don't need independence because Danielle's she's going to reconfederate things for us. She's going to leverage a better deal for us. Here's the problem. The point is that Alberta already is a separate state within Confederation. That's what the law says, okay? The scope of property and civil rights is potentially so broad as to encompass all aspects of civilian life in Alberta. Just stop and think about it. Can you think of something that doesn't come under the heading of property and civil rights? I can't. I can't think of one thing. So we already have, under our Constitution, all the authority we need to have an independent state. Why don't we have it? Well, I'll tell you why. Here's the problem. If we had a provincial government with the courage and the integrity to govern us in accordance with the existing Constitution, independence would be superfluous. In other words, we wouldn't need it. It is only because our provincial government is complicit in expansion of federal power that the Alberta independence movement even exists. And it is most important for people like you to understand this, especially those who are so deluded as to think that Danielle Smith secretly favors independence, which I say is patently absurd because she's already told you that she doesn't. Well, I want to thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer. And my last thing I get to do is I have the privilege of introducing my good friend and the person who's responsible for all of this, and this is Mr. Chris Scott.
One of the absolute best things about doing this is no matter how many times we go to a different place and have speakers and do things like this, we always seem to learn something new, don't we? Yes. Has everyone learned something new today? So I would like to say thank you to all of the presenters. You folks always do a fantastic job of advocating for a free and prosperous Alberta. It's so important that we have people who are willing to speak up and speak out about these issues, especially considering the question that's going to be asked of us this fall. Before I begin, though, I want to point something out. Leighton said that I'm responsible for all of this. So if CSIS is watching, it wasn't me. Just kidding. No, if CSIS is watching, it was me. I absolutely did. I was sitting in at my computer one day, thinking about what's going on, thinking about where Alberta's headed and what we're going to be asked, and I realized we really have to start having some conversations, some discussions. We got to get to every corner of this province and talk to everybody, whether it's a town of 100,000 or a hamlet of 6. We have to go there and talk to everybody. And the next thing that happened was really amazing. without talking to anybody about this, without confirming if it was a good idea, I posted a list of 200 events that I wanted to do in 186 days. And then I asked people, what do you think of it? And they were excited. And since then, a team has just assembled quite organically around this idea, and now we're able to do things like this. So I want to say thank you very much. So much hard work and dedication and volunteerism to make this happen. Thank you very much, everybody. Now, why am I up here wearing a blue Republic of Alberta sweatshirt and not at my restaurant helping do the dinner dishes? Well, I don't want to do dishes. This whole thing was an excuse to get out of doing the dishes. Just kidding. I'm here because I actually care about the future of this province. I wasn't born here, by the way. I was born in Campbell River, British Columbia. I was raised in Kamloops, and I used to say I grew up in Kamloops until someone pointed out that I have never grown up. So now I say I was raised there. And then I spent some of my teenage years on Vancouver Island, long enough to participate as an adult for the first time ever in an election, provincial election. When I turned 18, we had been in the midst of an NDP government in British Columbia for 4 years, and I remember fighting for a $6.50 an hour job. There was people 20 years older than me with, 20 years more experience, way more qualified, competing against me for the same job washing vehicles at the local car dealership. Actually, a bunch of them. And I started to realize that, hey, the policies that government make, we really feel that. And it wasn't until 25 years later that I realized that I was supposed to participate and try and influence the outcome of government, but that's another story. But then I watched the same thing happen again. I watched British Columbia again elect an NDP government, and I was astounded. I actually couldn't believe it. It was completely out of my, out of reality for me to think that people could be so stupid, do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. I just realized something, by the way. At the time, the girl I was dating, her mother, I don't think she really liked me very much. As a matter of fact, I don't think her father liked me all that much as well. And I just realized she was the dean of a college, and he was one of the managers within the Ministry of Forests in British Columbia. Both union, both provincially employed, and there's me, awfully conservative mouthpiece. So now I get it. I think they were both card-carrying NDP members. Anyway, that's beside the point. Yeah, elbows up, yeah. So I moved to Alberta in 2000 because at the time I was living in Campbell River again because it's a beautiful place to live. And a couple of my friends were out here working oil rigs, working service rigs. And when they would come back to town, they were buying these cool things called DVD players that only the rich could afford, and a whole bunch of DVDs and leather couches and all of these nice things that I wished I could have. All of these signs of prosperity, right? The things that we get that are nice, that's a sign that we're prospering. And I was struggling to pay my rent and put gas in my Ford Focus automobile, which is a nice one at the time, it was pretty new. So I made the decision one day, I just quit everything I was doing. I bought a $99 WestJet youth standby ticket, because that's how young I was. I flew to Edmonton. From the Edmonton International Airport, I took a cab to Leduc Safety Services, did my H2S. The next day I did my first aid, and then I did temp jobs in Edmonton for a week until I got a job in a rig. And my first paycheck, I couldn't believe it. I thought I won the lottery. I remember it was $1,511. And I had never seen that much money in my life. That was amazing. I kept at it. I worked a bunch of oil field jobs. The last job I had, I was a superintendent in Colombia with a bunch of supervisors working for me and a great team. It was a fantastic job. But throughout my time in the energy industry and living in Alberta, I realized something. I am Albertan. I happen to be born in British Columbia, but I chose to stay in Alberta. I chose to be an Albertan because that's who I am. That's what I believe in. This is home for me. and it's always felt like home. But I felt a little bit different in 2020, in 2021. I started to feel a little bit different when I was watching my, dare I say, savior-esque premier call me names and talk down to me and the people that I was associating with. I started to wonder about the future when I watched the 7-foot-tall RCMP squad guys put a chain around my gates on my business. I wondered about my country and my rights as I was being put in handcuffs for the crime of protesting government policy, doing so peacefully on my own land that I held title to. So my world was changed. It was kind of flipped upside down, and I ended up on this quest for survival. And my quest for survival was because I didn't know what was going on. I thought I did. I thought when my grade 4 teacher, Mr. Ruda, told me that I had all these rights and Canada was best and what he did with the Constitution, I believed that. I remember vividly the excitement in his voice and the sparkle in his eye when he was telling our class about how great Canada was because of what Pierre Elliott Trudeau did and because of the Charter Rights and Freedoms. It was exciting. And I started school, I was born in 1979, so I started school probably in 1984, 1985, 1980, so probably about 1986, I was with Mr. Ruda, and the Constitution had been repatriated a short 4 years ago. So it was still exciting for many, many people. But as I laid on the concrete slab in the drunk tank in Red Deer, where I spent 3 days, I didn't feel like that anymore. And I was actually more embarrassed about my own ignorance as to what my rights were and who I was than the fact that I was sitting in jail in the first place. And to some extent, I actually believed, I kind of deserve to be in jail because I haven't been civically engaged at all. I have taken my freedom for granted. I haven't bothered to learn anything about the Constitution. I don't even know what it says. And here I am in a position where I have to fight for my survival. I'm now on a quest for my survival. I've been charged 23 times under the Provincial Health Act with a potential fine of something ridiculous like $11 million. Realizing it's my fault because I don't know what's going on. So I started digging and I started peeling back that onion. It's rotten on the outside and you're trying to figure out what's real. And you're going deeper and you're digging more and you're learning more. And as I did, I came to the startling conclusion that nothing was what I thought it was. The rights that I thought I had didn't exist because the government could just simply say, we believe you shouldn't have those rights. They didn't have to go to court with me or anything like that. They didn't have to prove it. And the RCMP would enforce that against me. So all this to say, because of my own political apathy and political ignorance, I ended up in a position where I was forced to learn. And oh boy, what an exciting adventure this learning has been. It really has. I've learned a lot from people like Ben Trudeau and Leighton Grey and Kathy Flett and Dr. Wagner and my good friend Dennis Modry and my lawyer Jeffrey Rath and my friend Mitch Sylvester. And what I've learned is that unless we start to pay attention and act on what we know is true, we're going to end up in that situation again. And I would argue if we fail to do anything right now as Albertans, with the trajectory that we're on in this country, things will get arguably much, much worse. That is a known fact for me. I am 100% confident that if we continue with the status quo, as Albertans, things are going to get worse. I don't see it getting better. Now, we have an opportunity ahead of us. We have a question that's going to be asked. October 19th, there's a question going to be presented to you. And the question is going to be to do with Alberta sovereignty, Alberta's future, Alberta independence. And the way we answer that question is going to drastically alter what the future looks like for you and for your children and for your grandchildren and probably their grandchildren. It is a very, very heavy question. It is a critical question. It's a question that requires a society and a people to be armed, I shouldn't say armed, to be, to be as knowledgeable as possible, to be well informed, to be aware of the facts, to know what's real and what's gaslighting in order to make a good decision. That's why we're here tonight, to have these conversations, to open up the discussion. And we're a little bit later than I thought we were going to be. I want to have a really good Q&A, so I'm gonna wrap this up pretty quick. But no pressure, right? The way you answer that question in October is probably the most important question you're ever going to answer in your entire life, unless you're one of the missuses in this room and you answered that question, will you marry me, at one point, and now you're either thrilled that you did or not so thrilled, depending on the situation. But the question is going to be very important. So as we go through the next few months and we approach the time that we're asked that question, I really want to encourage all of you to learn as much as you can. We cannot afford to continue in the apathetic, ignorant state that we've largely been in as Canadians and as Albertans for the last decades, at least my entire adult life. We cannot afford to do that. It's too important. And so as you ponder these things and as you recall what the presenters have said to you and some of the information that they've given you that's really probably kind of tugging on your brain or maybe in your heartstrings, please be bold and let's talk about it. If you have questions, I want to hear it. We want to hear it. If you have reasons why you believe that we shouldn't pursue sovereignty for Alberta, I want to hear it. We want to hear it. If you are supportive of that, I want to hear it as well. However, on the Q&A portion that we're going to enter into right away, don't hold back. If you disagree with something that any of us have said, challenge us on it. And really put the pressure on us. This is important. In the next few events, it's going to be over 200 events. In the next events, we're going to be specifically inviting those who are opposed to us to join us for evenings like this. Let's have a meal together. Let's talk about these things. If you don't like what I'm saying, tell me and challenge my ideas. One of my good friends, well, he would have been my good friend, but he was murdered. A man who would have been my good friend, he said, when we stop talking about things, when the discussion ends, bad things happen. I will not let the discussion stop. I am not going to let the discussion about Alberta independence or Alberta sovereignty be canceled. I refuse to bend my knee to those who call me a traitor or who accuse me of doing unlawful things or tell me that I'm not good enough to speak. I refuse to listen to those people who tell me that I shouldn't be listened to because I'm just a waitress, burger flipper, cook, whatever. It doesn't matter what your station is, what your job is, the color of your skin. None of those things matter when it comes to your voice. Don't let anybody ever try and silence you because of who you are. No matter what you do, no matter what your occupation is, you are important in this discussion. And your questions are important. Your opinions are important. And tonight is an opportunity to share those. So with that, I said I would wrap it up quickly. I didn't do that. I apologize. I'm always late. But we're going to take let's do a 5-minute break, and not a litigated 5-minute break that my friend Leighton might suggest is 5 minutes, which is more like 10. We're going to do a real 5 minutes so we can get you out of here sooner rather than later. Grab a coffee, grab a water, make yourself comfortable, prepare your questions, and when we return to our seats in precisely 5 minutes, we're going to open the floor to questions, and I would ask a favor, please. We don't have time for the statements. You know, when someone gets a microphone and like, yeah, back in 1918 when I was 40 and working in the whatever, and then the question goes on for 10 minutes. We just need the questions. We'll stick around for a little while after, and we'd love to hear your stories, but let's get through the question part so that everyone gets a chance to have their voice heard. Thank you very much for coming, and I look forward to your questions. answer period, the best time of the evening.
Do we sit in the order that was spoken, or just...
I have no idea.
You're live. I see all your beautiful faces down there.
I don't want to rush you folks, but Ben here does turn into a pumpkin very shortly.
You don't want to see that. Yeah.
Oh.
Make you look like string bean.
Mike is still signing. He's the popular.
Yeah.
He's too popular.
He is.
That's okay. We can get going.
Hi, you have a question?
Yep. So I'm one of the canvassers that have been collecting signatures, and one of the things that people have asked me about that I didn't know what to tell them, the people's concern is, what about our portion of the federal debt?
Okay, well, I'll take a stab at that. Now, this is my opinion as an Albertan, because this is one of those things that it's a negotiation item, right? It's like we don't know until we have the discussion. But in my opinion, as an Albertan, I look at what Alberta has contributed to Confederation. It's somewhere in the tune of $600 billion. And when you adjust that for inflation, it's closer to 1.2 to 1.5 trillion with a T, as in 1,000 stacks of $1.2 billion. That's a lot of money. So in my mind, I think we've probably paid our share. The other part of it is that, we never really got a say in whether or not our federal government was going to double the amount of money in circulation. We never got a say whether or not our federal government was going to send whatever it is, $14 billion to be laundered support Ukraine. 25 billion. We didn't get a say in that. And we really had no way of preventing any of those things from happening because our voice within Parliament just wasn't effective. So from my perspective and in my opinion, as just a regular average Albertan, the debt is not anything to do with us. And that's where I would start the negotiation.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I? Yeah? Yeah, well, for the debt too, like if you look like just the math, we're like 12 or 15% of the population now of the country. Basically 1 trillion debt. I think the debt was at 1.1 trillion. Last time I checked on January 16, might double by then, but I don't know. But all that to say that our debt portion equals around 170 billion, let's say. And meanwhile, we're debating for a pension plan at the bottom line, 177 billion to the upward of 350. So I believe that only with the pension plan we could as well. Not only, but strictly, if we just look at the pension plan, we could even, during our negotiation, the pension plan alone negotiate the balance of the debt. So there's another option where I believe it would make sense.
Hi, I'm being very optimistic. So if we win, how are we going to structure so that we don't have corruption like what we're dealing with right now?
I'm so glad that you asked that question because when I was at an event in Bonnyville, and Jeff Rath was there, and Mitch Sylvester, and Dr. Modry, all really good people. I asked them this question, and I didn't really get a satisfactory answer. And the question you asked might be the most important question that needs to be asked about Alberta.
Yeah, and we don't want another jump from one frying pan into another frying pan, and then what do we do?
Madam, there's so much wisdom. I feel like I'm talking to King Solomon right now. But you know, our first speaker was Mr. Crane, and he said something about building a society based upon a foundation of values, Judeo-Christian values. Okay. So, on one view of the matter, the sickness in our society is that we have divorced ourselves from valuing truth. And in Christianity, truth is embodied in one person, and that's our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Yeah. And you really cannot value truth, in my opinion, and this has been proven over time, actually. You cannot say that you are a society that values truth and goodness, and good government for that matter, unless you understand that basic fundamental principle. And unfortunately, not to offend all the classical liberals in the audience, basically all of the foundations of our law, including the rule of law and the presumption of innocence and freedom of speech and just about every other principle that you take for granted, is all biblical. Most of it's in the Old Testament. And just to use one example, you know, the United States of America are you know, our brothers to the south. I mean, we pick on Trump and everything, but the reality is the United States has flourished, and they're not unique in this because every nation that has been founded upon Judeo-Christian values and has abided by them has flourished. Much more than any other society, any other type of society. But the reason why the United States has been able to weather so many challenges historically, remember, they fought a revolution against the preeminent power of the time. They had a civil war. They've engaged in world wars, and you know now they're the world hegemon. We must ask the question: why have they been able to weather all of these storms? And the reason why is because the wise men, the founders of their country, based the American Constitution upon the prescription for a proper state that is in the Old Testament. And if you don't understand that, you really don't understand anything about American constitutional law. And so, and I'll use another example. And you made such a great point, because you know we could talk about all the economic benefits of Alberta independence, and we should talk about those because they're important. But you're so right. We could be jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. If we don't create a good society, then we may be doing evil, right? Think of the Roman Empire, okay? The Roman Empire might be the richest empire in history. In fact, I believe it is. But it's also the most evil because they were pagan, and it took our Lord and Savior to civilize the Roman Empire and to civilize us. And without that, we don't have Western civilization, we don't have Western culture, and we can't build a proper state that will ensure good government and the 3 F's that Ben Crane, or that Mr. Crane was talking about.
Okay, thanks.
So what Leighton is talking about leads to an opportunity. That's what this is about. The question on Alberta sovereignty is about an opportunity. We have an opportunity to do something that's never been done before in this province or in this country for that matter. We have an opportunity to get together as Albertans over a period of time and have discussions just like this and decide how we consent to be governed. We have an opportunity to enshrine things in our Constitution that make it as impossible as we can make it for this corruption like what we're seeing right now to happen. That's the opportunity. And I want to let you know, if you don't know this, we haven't done that. We have never done that. The people that inhabit the Dominion of Canada have never done that. In 1866 actually, it wasn't Canadians who decided how they wanted to be governed and consented to that. It was a statute law passed by British Parliament that imposed that system of governance on us. This is where we get to grow up and do it ourselves. And the answer to the question, how do we prevent the corruption, is every one of us have to be involved and participate in that process and use the knowledge that we gather from our quest for sovereignty and independence to pay attention to history, to know what other constitutions look like, what worked, what didn't work, and then advocate for what we believe is the true and right way to constitutionally enshrine what our values are. That's the real opportunity with Alberta independence.
He kind of said what I was going to say, but I'll tack on a little bit more to it. In this process, we've got a chance to have a do-over. I got asked at one of these events, how did we get here? How did this all happen? And the fact of the matter is, it's simply because we allowed it. We stayed home. We didn't go out. We didn't vote. Our voting record here is abysmal. Absolutely abysmal. So it's on us to now shed that and learn, find out, get involved. And the only way that we're going to be able to have that opportunity to design a constitution that's going to work for us is by getting out to vote on that referendum. If you've never, ever, ever voted in your life, that is a good day to start. That is not the day to stay home. Because I hate to say it, but that might be the only opportunity we have to vote our way out of this mess. And that's the fact of the matter. So I don't care who's playing hockey. I don't care if it's your grandkids or your kids playing hockey. You go and you vote on that referendum. And if your neighbor didn't go, you go and you pick them up and you say, we're making history today, my friend. We're going to go vote in this referendum. And then if you see somebody else that didn't go, you encourage them. You're going to make history in Alberta for the first time ever. We get to vote what kind of a future we want. And that's part of how we make sure that this doesn't happen again. And then you stay engaged through that whole constitutional process of figuring out what we want. You stay engaged to vote in our president. You stay engaged to vote in whatever other representatives we decide we're going to have as we continue to build this province into the country that we want to have for ourselves. And then after that, you continue. And you make sure you teach the next generation. You take those little ones to the polling station so that they understand and learn. This is what we do. This is part of living here. It's our obligation and our responsibility. And that's how we will ensure to not get into this spot again.
There seems to be a misconception of the steps that we're taking to get through this. I'm wondering if it's possible for you to explain the steps towards the referendum and what that entails, and then what's to follow after that.
Well, there's the process that's being followed right now is under a law called the Clarity Act. Okay, so in 1998, following the referendum that Ben Trudeau talked about, there was a reference to the Supreme Court of Canada of a question about when and how and under what circumstances a province could secede from Canada. The jurisdiction of the court to answer that question is something that needs closer examination. But the result was the Supreme Court said to the federal government, you could pass a statute sort of setting out what that would involve. That statute, the Clarity Act, there's a lot of problems with it. The main problem is what happens after the referendum. I'm pretty confident that there's going to be a yes result. And the reason why I am is because I look to the 2021 referendum on equalization, which was sort of like a mini referendum on independence, in my opinion. And so I would not be surprised if we get between 60 and 65% yes support. That's my prediction. And if I'm wrong, then history will prove me wrong. But the devil's in the details here, and my concern is about how this is going to unfold afterwards, because this is where it gets a little bit muddy. And unfortunately, the Premier has made this even more muddy by adding all these other questions. And of course, the Clarity Act, hence the name, is supposed to be a clear question, and that's been muddied. So the whole thing may have been sabotaged already. That's an open question. But what will happen after there's a referendum result? That's something we don't know because it's never happened before. And it's important to understand that the Clarity Act process is actually inconsistent with Canadian history, because if you go back to the Charlottetown Accords, when the maritime provinces wanted to join Canada, they didn't use this process. Okay, they just got together and agreed that they were going to join Canada. And then Newfoundland, more recently, in 1949, the Americans were courting Newfoundland. And they were convinced by the federal government, and there was a referendum there, there was a vote to join Canada, and they did. They didn't ask Alberta or any of the other provinces. So the Clarity Act is something quite new, so we don't know precisely, and this is getting to your question, we don't know precisely what's going to happen after the referendum. And that's where things are going to get really interesting.
Well, just to add on that, I believe that we're so used to be the lapdog of the federal in this province that no Quebec, that we just acquiesce that the Fed has something to say. The day after the acceptance of so the Clarity Act comes, so 98 Supreme Court judgment comes to law in 2000 under the Clarity Act. On a certain day, I don't remember the date, let's say on Monday morning, well, on Tuesday morning, in the Quebec legislature, there's an unanimous vote rejecting the federal law of the Clarity Act. Basically, Quebec right away answered back, fired back, saying your stupid law doesn't mean anything for us. And if ever we do a referendum, we don't care what you have to say. Thank you very much. So basically, this is another problem that I see in the debate, in the walk that we do right now, is that we're debating and talking, the Clarity Act. There are 7 gatekeepers of the Clarity Act. First, they can decide that not enough people participated. Secondly, they can decide that not enough class of people participated, and they decide that who are the class. Is the LGBTQ are represented, the First Nation, the transgender of 17th Street is represented. They can decide whatever needs to be represented. After that, it needs to be voted in the Common with basically 287 MPs that are not Albertan MPs that have to accept that. After that, they have to go to the Senate, and the Senate has to say okay. And after that, it has to go to the Governor General, who can say okay, yeah. So this is ridiculous. This is a travesty of use of legal matters from the feds again. And we just need not to even think about it, not even talk about it, not even apply it. And we have the right to do so because in our Constitution, province have a say over what the federal does and not the opposite.
Let me boil that down for you. The Clarity Act, no, that was awesome. That was great. The Clarity Act is Canada's preference on how this will go. That is a preference. At no point in history has the preference of the original country bent the will of the region that wanted to leave in a democratic way. It does not work like that. If the parent country had to agree that the region that was seceding could leave, we would have never had any new countries. Never. There's only 2 things that we need to make this happen. And that is the will of the people. And that's shown through a successful referendum on Alberta independence and international recognition. Everything else is just Canada's preference. But when it comes to Alberta and what Albertans are consenting to, it doesn't matter what the Constitution says because we are patently rejecting the Constitution, the constitutional order of Canada, the laws that govern us, and saying we no longer consent, we wish to do our own type of governance. So all of those things that Ben said are completely true, and in pursuing this through the legal Canadian pathway via the Clarity Act, it's just a polite way of observing the preference of Canada. Because I don't know, we're just very polite, I guess, right? Yeah, a bit too much. Maybe too much.
And I'll just add one thing too, from the more simple mind. I liken this to us being, say, in England. The pioneers is what I'm trying to say. They left a system that was corrupt to them. And they went out. I don't think they knew a clue what was in North America. But they left on the Mayflower and all them things, not knowing. So there's that element to it. I'm not saying that that's, just jump and then hope it goes. But it worked. It worked. Look at our societies today. We're here today because those guys did that. So that's just a thought.
Just wanted to take a step back from the day of the referendum, if we get to that point. where there seems to be a misconception of what the gaining of signatures is for. There's a lot of people that are under the understanding that if they put their signature on that piece of paper, it's happening, and then we're out. Can you touch on that and explain a little bit better of what the purpose of the signature today means for Alberta?
Okay, so what people are signing at this moment during this the petition campaign is it's a petition to compel the provincial government to ask a question of Albertans. This is encompassed by the Citizens Initiative Act, which gives Albertans a means to trigger a direct democracy question. That's what it is. So when somebody signs this particular petition, which, by the way, we're not advertising or advocating for the petition. We're telling you about the situation around it. When somebody signs that, they're signing, saying we want the government to ask a question. They could plan on saying no. They could plan on saying yes. That is irrelevant. The fact of it is that it's just a way to get the government to ask the question. So when you sign it, you are not signing to become an independent nation of Alberta. You were signing to trigger a process to ask Albertans on a whole about that question.
And I just want to add to that, like I'm a very fervent advocate for that petition. And if you read my book, and I will say all the time, I'm not a separatist. So.
Okay, thank you.
I noticed some animosity towards Danielle Smith in the separation movement, and I can understand it on one hand with adding questions to the referendum, but we have to remember she did lower the threshold for signatures, and she refused to demonize us, and she has separatists in her caucus. So I ask, is that a front worth fighting?
First of all, I admire many things about our premier. I think she's a very smart lady. She's a very astute politician. And I think she genuinely cares about Alberta and the people of Alberta. And so I give her a lot of credit. I also applaud some of the legislation that she's passed that has been very controversial. And that took a lot of courage. But Danielle Smith fundamentally is a Federalist. She's been very open about this. And I was at a meeting in Bonnyville last year. It was a fundraiser for her. And, Mitch Sylvester asked, he appealed to the crowd and said, everybody, clap if you want to see a free and independent Alberta. And there was a huge, as you can imagine, it was a huge roar. And then Danielle responded by saying, "Okay, raise your hands if you want a better deal for Alberta within Canada." And it was crickets. You could have heard a pin drop. And then she said something that really frightened me. She said, "Well," after she heard the response, she said, "Well, I'm going to keep trying to do that anyway." And with what my ears heard was the familiar refrain of a politician who assumes that they know better than we do what's best for us. And that's my concern. She has a very clear vision of Canada. I think she's committed to it, and she's been very open about this, and I give her credit for being honest about it. You're right, though. She has not openly obstructed, and she's not openly opposed to the referendum, and she does deserve credit for that. I agree with you. But my concern is if Alberta were being governed in the way that we asked her to govern us, and bear in mind, she has a mandate. She is a majority government. She doesn't have to go to us for a referendum on immigration, okay? She has a mandate to pass legislation regarding immigration. And so what I question about our current government is, are they governing according to a vision of what is good for Albertans, or are they practicing what we call populist politics? where her main concern is to stay in power. Because without being in power, she can't govern and she can't keep the UCP government going. So, I mean, my short answer to you is I don't know, right? I don't know. I can't read her mind. But based on her actions, I have to say that she does not support full independence for Alberta. By the way, I want to commend you for being here. It's wonderful to see young people at a meeting like this, and thank you for your question.
To that question, too, if I could add to that, a couple of things that we need to remember. The first thing is that the UCP party is not an independence party, right? That's no part of their mandate. It's no part of their constitution. They did not ever run on that. They've never said that they're going to run on that. So we can't expect them to yet. So that's the first thing we need to remember. So asking anybody that is an MLA for the UCP to come right out and openly support this, or did you sign, or did you vote, or did you this, or did you that? It's not fair to do that to them, because they're not an independence party. So leave them alone on that is my first thing. And I say that as a UCP member who's very involved, right? The second part to that I would say is that the independence movement has gotten this far, like the farthest we have ever gotten since 1905, because we left the politicians out of it, right? This is a movement literally of the people, by the people, for the people. And so let's continue to leave the politicians out of it for just a little while longer, because they tend to screw things up. They really do. And once we've got this referendum behind us, we know what the results are going to be. Let's also remember there is a provincial election next year, 2027. This is our first opportunity for everybody to get involved. You get into those CAs. You buy your membership to the UCP. You get involved in figuring out who you want your candidates to be, and you do not allow them to choose your candidate for you. If your current MLA sucks, get rid of them. They don't have to be your MLA. You can get somebody else in there. And let's also leave our premier off the hook for right now. She may not be the one that takes us across the line. She's very capable, we know that. She's done a lot of great things. But whoever does it has to have it right here. Deep, 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 deep. Because they won't survive it otherwise. They will not. So let's not ask her to do something that she can't do if she's not willing to. It's okay. Our Moses will rise up and we'll get where we need to go.
And I just want to end with what Kathy just said. Recently, most people don't know like all the emotion involved in the referendum campaign. I just want to mention that in 2012, the PQ came back in power in Quebec after 8 years of absence under the direction of Pauline Marois, a fierce sovereignist. And the night that she was elected, while her speech, there's an English guy that came and shot at her, killed the soundman, and her bodyguard took the second bullet. So this is what politics. Yeah, thank you, Max, for your sacrifice to come. Yeah, okay. So all that to say that when you say that when you push for a cause like that, you need to be willing to face about everything.
I'm Laurel Pohl, and I just want to thank you guys for all that you've done and the time and energy you've put into this. We appreciate all your efforts and time. So my question is, I'm pretty sure that the referendum will go through, but I'm not so sure that we're going to have enough brave Albertans to vote yes. So what is Plan B? What are you planning to do if the answer is no? Will you go to the government, the federal government, and ask them to open up the Constitution and redo it, or what is your plan?
Read my book.
It's that simple. Well, the ultimate plan B is a declaration of independence. And there is foundation for this under international law. Some of you may know that when Kosovo declared independence about 20 years ago, Canada was the first nation to recognize them. I think it's been made pretty clear from the overtures we've had from the Trump administration that they would recognize Alberta. Trump bloviates a lot about 51st state, but the United States is very dedicated to the idea of self-determination. You can see this happening in Iran right now, where the head of state has been taken out, and the Americans are inviting the Iranian people to select a new leader of their country. So that ultimately, that is the sort of nuclear option in terms of Plan B, is a declaration of independence. And actually, I think that declaration has to come at some point. And what I would like to see is, if there is a positive referendum result, is that declaration would be made at that time. Of course, we cannot ask Danielle Smith to do that, but if that declaration were made in some form, in some way, internationally, then that would really cement the referendum result, and I think it would go a long way to solving some of the problems that some of the panel have talked about with the Clarity Act.
Just to confirm, do you mean if the referendum fails? We'll go. Okay.
We'll go, but the next step is asking to vote again for separatism, right? Like, the referendum is not the end of it, is it?
Yeah. That is, yeah. If the referendum passes, that triggers it. That triggers negotiations.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and that's why we need to be so diligent with that 2027 election, because we want the right people in the legislature negotiating that.
Can I ask a second question? So how are you going to ensure that vote is honest and the votes are counted honestly?
You guys are. You're going to volunteer to be scrutineers. That's the truth. You guys are going to do it.
There's one more thing there. Have you ever heard the phrase "too big to rig"? Anyone ever heard that before? There is a fear in this country that our elections are not as honorable as we once believed they were. So that means that when we're advocating for something, we don't just need to bring a few more people with us to support our position. We need to bring as many as we can. Bring the whole neighborhood, bring the whole province, and make it too big to rig.
That's a good answer.
Thank you. Very question. When we get the required number of signatures on the petition, are we 100% guaranteed that we will have that referendum vote this October? And that would be along with Danielle Smith's 9 other questions. I just want to know that if we get, and I believe we will, get the required number, then are we guaranteed that referendum vote will occur this October 2026?
There's only 2 things in life that's guaranteed. I didn't even need to say it. The Premier has been very clear that she will give us the referendum. So if you take her at her word and you believe what she says, then we will get our referendum. I will point out, though, that the Citizen Initiative Act, it actually says that the government has to, and they're trying to change this, by the way, that they have to give us the referendum, but it doesn't say when. It doesn't tell them that they have to have this same question. They get to decide the time and what the wording is and all sorts of things. However, taking Premier Smith at her word, I would say that yes, we will get our referendum.
I hope sooner than later.
My only concern is these 9 other questions. I never in my life heard of a referendum at 10 questions. And I believe that alone can disqualify the question, because it's distracted from the question that asks the people. I believe it's too much of an important question to be to be put in a soup of 9 other incident, like these 9 questions are stupid, sorry. But anyway, so all that to say that I believe the strategy is that, and this is why it's so easy. This is why all the requirements are gone, because once we went and asked the question on that question, we can then put the question on the shelf for the next 20 years and keep on doing what we're doing. That's the strategy.
I have 2 questions. First one is to just back up the lady that was before me. Is there a way that we can ensure that we get a single question ballot in October? That our ballot at the referendum is on a single ballot separate from her other 9?
That's an excellent question. When Premier Smith gave her address and was talking about the referendums, she indicated that they would be on the same ballot. Afterwards, I believe that her email and phone absolutely lit on fire with people like us saying, no, this is completely ridiculous, you can't do this. And there was assurances, for whatever that means, that it would be on its specific separate ballot. That's all I can say about it.
Than not.
The position of Professor Bratt from Montreal University, which is, I'm not a big fan of him, but I went to listen to him, and he had a very interesting middle ground thing to say, is that technically we should, if they have 10 questions, we should have 10 ballots. So 1 ballot per question. Or will be presented with a toilet paper roll of question, and then we need to separate every square when we go to the ballot stuff. So yeah.
But here's one thing that I would remind us: if we're getting crap thrown at us and stuff to really try and get us distracted, it's up to you and me to not allow that to happen. If there's 100 questions on that roll of toilet paper, you can answer them, but don't lose your focus. You're looking at number 100.
Thank you. My other question is, I'm collecting signatures right now, and we're seeing a trickle, just a trickle of people coming in. And yeah, we're hoping that we have that 177, 100,000. But are there any attempts being made for people like Hutterite colonies to be invited to the question? We have 12 colonies around this area. And if with C9, like we're going to lose our ability, our freedom for religion, our ability to wear a cross, an ability to say our prayers, ability to go to our church if they're even allowed. That is a core group of people that are not being invited to this question. And I really think that we're missing out on that.
Well, they are being invited. The conversations have occurred. It's a difficult thing because the Hutterites as a group, they stay completely apolitical, and they do that because they don't want any friction from one colony to another. When they came to the United States, they actually made an agreement with the United States government that they would never go against the government as long as the government left them alone. That's why they don't vote. That's why they don't get involved. However, they are Albertans, and they are aware of what's going on, and they're individuals. So the conversations are occurring. There is people are reaching out all the time and making sure that those who wish to exercise their democratic right as an Albertan can. So yes, it is 100% happening.
To me, that group of people were being, asked to the table.
Yeah, and I'll further to that. I don't know all the answers myself. I don't know where it is. But they have several colonies that have indicated to us that they want to be involved, and evidently there is paperwork from the government, because the other thing is they don't own the land, right? Because it's the top down somehow in their hierarchy. So how is this guy, and his wife? How are they supposed to vote? But there is paperwork that has been designed by, I don't know whether it's Elections Canada or
It's
Alberta.
Elections Alberta has
Yeah.
a forum for the colonies.
Exactly. So it's out there, and it's happening.
For the colonies, just, if we go separate and we want to have a strong and viable food source, that's a wonderful place to start. Is they're already in production, they already are, meeting all the government regulations and everything. I just, wanted to speak for them.
They make the best bread.
A couple of things. First off, I listened a little bit to that debate between our favorite Ontario lawyer and Jason Kenney, and one statement that Jason Kenney made during that debate really stood out to me. He diminished everything that we're about by saying that Alberta cannot survive as a statelet. He described Alberta as a statelet, a tiny little place that would have no authority, no power, and no future. We're bigger than Germany. We're bigger than England. We're bigger than France. We have an economy that's bigger than 95% of the rest of the countries of the world. And he described us as a statelet, a bunch of children. Thank you very much, Jason Kenney. I'm sure as heaven glad you're not still our premier. Now, just a couple of things, food for thought. I'm considering this crap that's going on in British Columbia, where basically the federal government is giving title to Aboriginal groups. I want you to consider this. This is the question. I want you to respond to it. Okay? Here's my thoughts. The way that an individual is described as a native to a country is that he is or she is born there. That is a native Canadian. Someone who's born here is a native Canadian, not somebody who came from Germany and their great grandfather did, and they stayed here and were born. If they were born here, they're native Canadians. So therefore, what I'm suggesting is that everybody who lives in British Columbia has the same rights to British Columbia property as everybody else, and because they didn't sign treaties, the Aboriginal Canadians in British Columbia have the same rights to the land as the rest of us. I want you to consider that.
Can you get to the question, please?
So I want you to consider that and respond. I want to hear what you think about that, because in my mind, they have no more right to property than we do, having been born there.
Well, you are correct, but the problem, and if you read Dr. Wagner's books, the problem is that because of the change that occurred in our law, whereby judges became lawmakers, unappointed elitist judges became lawmakers, they breathed into Canadian law some legal fictions, including the idea that certain people are First Nations, that this idea that Canada is an unjust country that was colonized and that the Indian was subjugated. And they have created, they've not only diminished all of the rights that are in the Charter, they've created a whole bunch of new ones that they had no authority to create. And that's what we're dealing with right now. But coming back to what's in the Constitution, as I said during my speech, under Section 9213, the federal government has no authority whatsoever to enter into an agreement with anyone to give away the city of Vancouver. They just have no right to do it. The only way it can happen is through the complicity of the Premier, Mr. Eby. That's why it's happening, okay? It's important to understand that, and this is why independence is so urgent for Alberta. We can say we can throw all the roses at Danielle's feet, and we can be very grateful, and we should be, that we have her as our Premier instead of Mr. Eby. But, all it takes is an election to change that. You just mentioned Mr. Kenney. Okay, what if Mr. Kenney was our Premier right now? Okay, we had a referendum on equalization. What did Mr. Kenney do with that? I think it went on that toilet roll Ben was talking about.
Well, it didn't make it to the toilet roll. Anyway, thank you for that. I just wanted to mention that and get your ideas on it, because we need to think about that. When the government of England gave over property to the provinces in Canada, they gave it to the people. They didn't give it to the government. The governments of the Canadian provinces are custodians of property that belongs to the people. That's all of the people.
Thank you.
So just a quick comment. If Jason Kenney thinks that Alberta can't make it on their own and we're a statelet, I would just respond by saying, Mr. Kenney, hold my beer.
I was at an event similar to this a few weeks ago, and I spoke to one of the speakers afterwards and just brought up the point, or kind of asked the question. It's like, we've got a document that says we're a nation under God now. Why does that not seem to have any impact on some of the laws and some of the decisions coming down from our courts? And this speaker told me, oh, that has no weight. And I thought, my understanding is there's a colon after that statement. And I've been told by others, that means everything after that falls under that. Currently, we've got judges and politicians and others that swear allegiance to the crown. If we're a separate republic, is there a way, perhaps, that you've understood that we can get the people that are either judges or politicians or whatever authority to swear allegiance to our preamble to be a nation under God? In other words, we can't have a Supreme Court making up laws that do not agree with that preamble.
I'll answer the first part of that really quickly first, and this is an opinion. I believe that the way society has gone in the last few decades, there are people who look at that preamble and they believe that they are their own God. So the question would be, which God? Is it the new gods of our medical doctrine that say that we have to do things to our bodies that we don't believe are necessary? Is it the new gods of the distribution of our rights, and they say that we don't have our rights because someone sneezed? I think that's a really big problem here, is that a lot of our lawmakers and judges, they believe that they are the supreme authority, and they're failing to see that their authority only exists because of the one true God. And it's an opinion thing. I can't say for sure that's what's happening, but it sure seems like it to me.
So the preamble to the Charter, which is part of the Constitution, mentions that we recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. But later on in the Charter, and I can't remember if it's section 28, but it's something down there, it says that this entire Charter must be interpreted in light of Canada's multicultural heritage, not in light of its Christian heritage, in light of its multicultural heritage. So the very first Supreme Court decision that was based on freedom of religion, it was the 1985 Big M Drug Mart decision. The Supreme Court said that the God that's mentioned in the preamble is not the Christian God, it's the multicultural God. They said it explicitly in 1985. It was one of the very first Supreme Court decisions under the Charter. So right from that time, all other subsequent court decisions that invoke, where anybody invokes the supremacy of God clause, is seen as like not being the Christian God, and so that's why it has no effect. And to the second part, if Alberta becomes independent, we get to write our own constitution. And so we can write what we want, and we can put, for those of us who understand that rights come from God, not from the state. And so we have to begin our Constitution acknowledging God as our source of life and our source of rights, because if we don't do that, and it has to be much stronger than what's happened with the Charter so it doesn't get undermined, because if we don't acknowledge God as a source of our rights, we don't actually have rights, because then rights come from the government, and the government can change whatever it wants. So it's very important that our new Constitution in Alberta recognizes God as supreme and that our rights come from Him. That's my opinion on that.
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay. My question is, Do you agree that we can assume that we're going to have an oil market from the beginning just because an American administration is unlikely to deliberately inflict an oil supply shock upon their country?
Yes, I believe that we'll continue to have an oil market. We currently export upwards of close to 95% of our energy to the United States. While it is possible that they could ramp up production in 5, 6, 10 years and replace it, I don't see that particularly happening. The idea, there's this notion kind of floating around that the energy industry, the oil industry in particular, oil and gas, is a twilight industry. That is completely false. The projections for our production and usage of oil and gas going into the next 25, 30, 40 years shows it doubling and tripling. All indicators show more energy use. So the idea that we're facing an existential threat to the energy industry, specifically if the United States somehow, instead of following the trajectory and triples their energy usage in 40 years and somehow cuts it in half, it is an unrealistic scenario to me, and it isn't supported by any current market metrics or production numbers or anything like that.
I guess my follow-up question on that is that when discussing the topic of independence with people, it's extremely common for them to say that you won't have any ability to sell anything across borders, but oil's a basic thing that's going to be guaranteed to be getting across the border.
Well, yeah, and my response to that is always, trade is not just it's not just something people do because they feel like it. People trade because it's mutually beneficial and economically beneficial for both parties. So, the idea that when Alberta goes independent, all of a sudden there's going to be this angst and anger between Canada and the United States and Alberta, and nobody's going to trade anymore, that goes against all the fundamentals of economics. It's just, it isn't something that's going to happen. We want to explore trade deals that are beneficial to both of us, and regardless of whatever flag or banner is on the nation, people are going to continue to do that because they want to make money, right? We want to be prosperous. So the idea that we would forego that because someone wants to throw a temper tantrum about a flag is, I don't see that happening.
The other thing I was wondering is that what kind of leverage do you think the federal government will try to use during the process of separating?
All of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. I have a comment that came to me as a canvasser about the names that we have on our list that go to Elections Alberta. Where do they go from there? And the concern is because a little while ago an emergency act was called against supporters of the trucking convoy, and this particular individual is concerned about that information being on the sheets or making donations to the website, and I'm just wondering what happens with those names. Thank you.
I've said this a number of times, and I will say it again. Brace yourselves, folks. And if you're watching at home, listen very carefully. If you live in a country where you're scared to participate in the democratic process for fear of government reprisal, you need to get out from under that nation, period. Worrying about your government persecuting you or freezing your bank account for existing and having opinions is a ironclad reason why you should support an independent Alberta.
But to add to that and answer the question, every single one of those pieces of paper is a legal document. It's a legal document. That's why it all has to be in ink. You cannot do this online. And so once those are all turned into Elections Alberta, they are then under their control, and that's where they stay until EA doesn't need them anymore, and then my understanding is they're shredded.
We This is where as well it's important to understand our system. Election Alberta, like Election Canada, and all these electoral entities that control the vote in this country are independent entities. So they are not under the Premier. They're not even, they answer directly to the Lieutenant Governor by law. And the Director of Elections, so the boss of the entity is can go to jail for breaking any laws of that entity. So he's personally liable of the safety and the accuracy of the vote, not the organization. So usually the Director of Elections in every province in Canada take their job very seriously. So we can, otherwise it doesn't make sense, and we better just stop voting right away. No?
Okay, my question is more of a, I have a lot of Indigenous friends, a lot of people in the Native community that are just unapproachable. They have been brainwashed, they have been programmed that this is just the wrong thing. I have been racking my brain for weeks to come up with a quick grabber question, comment, statement, something that I can actually engage in a conversation with them about this whole thing. And I'm kind of at a loss. Like I get turned off right away, and I don't want to lose my friends, but I really would like to give them this opportunity for this wonderful, to change their lives, right? Like I just need something that I can give them that we can actually start a conversation.
Okay, here's the question you asked them. What is the best thing about being an Indian in Canada? Is it that Indians have the worst longevity? Is it because we're highest in drug addiction, in alcoholism, in infant death, in prostitution, prisons, domestic violence, standard of living, income? We're last. We're supposed to be the first nation. We should be called the last nation. We should be called last in the nation. And if you can hear to my voice, it pisses me off. My grandmother went to residential school with her sister. Okay? My father was born on reserve in St. Louis, Saskatchewan. My grandmother told me before she died, she said, Leighton, if I hadn't gone to residential school, you wouldn't be a lawyer. Because sons of illiterate Indians don't go to law school. So that's just one of the lies that's been told about Indian residential school, okay? Most of the people who went to Indian residential school, if you talk to them, it wasn't a bad time at all. But the federal government had to import critical race theory into Canada. And so they conveniently went through the Sinclair Commission report and took out all the abuses, which only account for about, I would say, 15% of the anecdotal stories. I know because I've actually gone through the 3,400-page report. Justin Trudeau didn't do that. He can't even read 3.4 pages unless it's his own biography. Okay? So what you say to them is, what's so great about being in Canada? And then here's the second part. Get them to compare the situation of the Indian in Alberta to the situation of the Métis person in Alberta, where they own their own land. They have a relationship with government, but they get to operate their own communities. They actually have self-governance, not the lie that's being sold to Indians in this country. So yeah, it's hard, you're right, because of the brainwashing and the propaganda, okay? But we've got, how do you reach a brain that's been propagandized? By being relentless. There's no other way, right? So I first of all, I applaud you for taking this on and seeing how important it is. But really, just having the conversation is really, really important. But understand, for an Indian person in Canada, it's like being at sea and you're holding on to a spar of wood, right? They think that being part of Canada is the only thing that's saving them from drowning. And then it's because they've been indoctrinated and propagandized into believing that.
So I'm going to be really bold. I'm going to be super, super bold. If I can make an arrangement to go to an event, will you come with me? Yeah?
But I can't guarantee you won't get beaten up with me.
Oh no, like I said, these are my friends, so they won't do that. But just to engage in conversation and bring those facts and stuff, I think. Okay, awesome.
I have to hold on to it, too.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. This is for Ben. It's kind of along the same line as this lady's question. I'm sure you're well aware in Quebec that the standard narrative has been for generations that Quebec is paying more to Canada than they're getting from it, especially to Alberta. And I know I have family in Quebec who keep telling me that Quebec is paying Alberta more than Alberta is paying Quebec. How do you propose we deal with this, regardless of how any referendum or whatever might turn out? We're still going to have to deal with that mindset in Quebec, and how do you propose we deal with it?
Okay, well, so it's very interesting because Quebec, in fact, the narrative was totally shifted in 1905 for the referendum because we knew clearly that we were not that we were paying less than what we received. So what we did, we changed the narrative, saying that it's not that question that we're paying less more than for what we receive, is that there's a fiscal inequality. So the difference between not a fiscal deficit or inequality versus paying too much for the feds is that do we receive all the services we're paying for to the feds? So what we've done in '96, we created a commission committee that answered to the executive committee of the province. So there's about 600 bureaucrats in Gatineau on the other side of the river, and their job every day of the year is to cross the river, to sit with the federal bureaucrats and tell them, you know what, we gave you $5 for that services. I believe we just received for $3, so give us back the $2. And this is exactly what they did. So in Quebec, you do 2 income reports, one from the province, one for the feds. So we know exactly how much went to the feds directly, and then they take that amount, they send it to that commission, and these guys make sure that every penny comes back in service, every single penny. So it's not that Quebec think that they're paying too much for their service, is that there's an unbalance, and we need to equal that unbalance. And the rest doesn't care. I mean, not a single Quebecer knows that they receive $13 billion from the feds. That is not even a subject. You would talk to a professor at Montreal University and will look at you, like, no, like, this is not even a subject. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, they're amazed to hear this, that, $13 billion, what are you talking about? You're crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been told I'm crazy.
And this is why we need to shift the way we deal with Quebec. Instead of confronting them, saying, oh, we're paying that much for you, which they will look at you saying, you're an idiot. No, you're not doing what you're saying. You have to embrace the way they deal and go see them and say, how do you do it? We want to do the same, and if we see the feds are in trouble.
It's called creative accounting, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's called playing the Westminster system.
Okay, thank you.
Last question.
It appears as though that might have been the last question. Am I accurate in my assumption? Oh.
Of course, last question. I know people who are currently not unemployed and they're receiving EI to some extent. Many people who slide into my DM say, I lost my job, yada, 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 getting EI. What do you think is going to happen to those folks who are collecting benefits after October 19 if the referendum passes?
Nothing. Nothing. When the referendum passes, that triggers negotiations. In those negotiations, these things are dealt with. Anything that the province currently manages right now, which is basic, we should be managing everything. If you read Ben's book, you'll understand that. Those things would require a simple change of letterhead. And when I say simple, I'm being a little facetious. There's some work to do. But we just basically change the uniform of the person doing the job. And Alberta does it. For anybody that's receiving a federal entitlement, and I'm not talking about like pension, because that's not an entitlement, that's a compelled investment with a crappy return that you own. I'm talking about an entitlement. It is my position that an independent Alberta must make sure that nobody gets left behind, in that anybody who's receiving a federal entitlement right now will continue to receive the same or greater until the time Alberta can have a replacement thing, right? So if you're receiving whatever it is, your OAS, however much amount it is, Alberta would have to pay that. There would be no, oh, we're just going to wait until we figure something out. No, we don't leave anyone behind. That's what I would advocate for. And I would encourage all of you to advocate for something like that as well, because how could we even think about doing something that's going to propel us into the most prosperous nation on earth and not consider that we're going to have to absorb some of the more intricate details that might cost a little bit of money to make sure no one gets left behind? That would be completely immoral to not do that.
And yeah. And again, EI is federal, but what Quebec did in, I think, 1997, they sat with the feds. They say, you know what, we don't want you to put your nose in our unemployment, so we're gonna make a deal together, and we're gonna manage that money ourselves. And so in Quebec, EI still, you receive the check from the federal government, but the management and the determination on who gets it, under which rules and which program are funded, is strictly provincial. So again, it's another thing that we could implement in Alberta, saying that we're going to take care of the EI money of the feds to train rig workers, to train people that serve our industry, and not what Ottawa decide to serve, and just like become just a last resort funding for something that we do not control, where we can actually have the power, like Quebec, to enter in an agreement to control even EI, which is federal.
And it's important to understand why Quebec was able to do that. It's because employment insurance or unemployment insurance, or by any other name, comes under property and civil rights. And, Quebec understands this, and to their credit, I mean, and they've actually shown the way for the other provinces about how to effectively exercise their constitutional rights. And we could be doing the same thing. We could be reading off their paper. We're just not. And if we did that, maybe we wouldn't need independence, frankly. But that's why. I mean, so much, as I said during my speech, of what we do and what we say and what impacts our lives comes under property and civil rights. That is such an opportunity, such an unexplored opportunity for Alberta. You can see what Quebec has done with that, and I applaud them for it, but it's such an undiscovered country. What we could do with 9213, we could expand that the same way the federal government has expanded their criminal law power to ban all firearms and confiscate them. We could expand that in the same way the federal government has expanded their authority over the environment, even though obviously environment is something of local concern, since the air here in Stettler, Alberta is very different than the air in St. John's, Newfoundland, but we're just not doing it. And the question is why? And I've tried to answer that question for you, but the better question is, because that's not happening, what do we need to do next? Thanks.
The other thing we need to consider when we're talking about creating our new country, because that's what we're doing, is creating our new country and making sure that no one is left behind, like Chris said, is remember who we are as Albertans, right? A lot of us have the shirts and the hats that says we are Albertan. We're in tax time right now, and we are so accustomed to being under a federal government whose only reason for existing is to screw us over. That is what we're used to. That's what we are accustomed to. But our evening began with Ben talking about values, about who we are, about what we believe in. And one of the values that Albertans hold very, very dear is we make sure that we help one another. right? What happens at harvest time if somebody's family, someone goes down? Everybody gets together and helps. What happens when there's a flood? Everybody gets together and fills those sandbags and makes sure that everyone's house is as safe as possible. What happens when there's fires? They meet people on the road to make sure they've got a water bottle or even a vehicle to get to the next stop, or go out and gather the horses that were let out in hopes that they'll be okay and be able to gather them up after. That's who we are. And that's the country we're going to build. So as for our seniors, you raised us. We're going to make sure you're looked after in every single way possible. There's no doubt about that. Because quite frankly, what Alberta is what the rest of Canada thinks they are. But they're not. They're not. And I don't think they ever will be. So we will build this country on those values. We will make sure that everybody has everything that they need, that every Albertan who wants a job has a job before anybody else comes into our country. Somebody the other day annoying says, well, what happens when all of these other Canadians, once we're our own country, they want to move here? And I said, they can apply for a visa. You don't just automatically get to come in. Thank you very much to what we built. But this is the opportunity we have, is to make things right, to right all the wrongs that have been done to us, and to do it together.
Okay, so now it seems as though there are no more questions. So I would like to say thank you to all of you for coming out tonight. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. And I would encourage you to take what you've learned here tonight and bring it into your circles. Tell your friends. Share what you've learned. Have the conversations. Encourage people that you know who disagree with you, if you are now on board and aligned with our opinions. Encourage them to come out to one of these meetings. Heck, don't even tell them what we're talking about. Just tell them there's going to be pierogies and get them in the room. Well, who knows? It might work, right?
It did, look.
It did work, yeah. So that's the idea. That's the idea that, you know, we can sit up here on these stages and we can talk to rooms full of people, but the reality is it's going to be you folks that become ambassadors for Alberta, to become disciples of Alberta sovereignty and bring this message out into your communities. So no pressure, but the future of Alberta and your children's future is in your hands now. And with that, I would like to wish you a fantastic evening. And Shane has something to say.
I'm just going to add a couple things to it. Thank you very much for coming. If you're able to help us strip the tables down and the chairs, that would be greatly appreciated. I'd also like to refer to Mr. Crane. I would encourage everybody to go to bencrane.com and download a copy of the song that he performed. He's got it on there. I think it'd be great if we ended up making that chart. That song hit the charts. So I would encourage everybody to go download a copy. I think it's 99 cents for a copy of it. And let's get it trending.
And also I'd like to point out that we have currently 300 people watching online, including people from the States and London as well. London, UK, not London, Ontario. London, UK, I just watched some people there. So if you want to see the recording, just come to me up front. I will take your cell phone number. I'm going to send you the streaming link up ahead. So thanks for tuning in.